Hello, it's Sammy here, and today I am delighted to be joined by a former professional footballer, author, and now pundit on MUTV, Ben Thornley. Firstly, Ben, I just wanted to ask you, how have you been keeping during this lockdown?
I think it'd have been a lot more difficult not being able to go out, knowing that it's terrible weather, but at least you do get this option to be able to enjoy the sunshine. So that's eased it slightly. But listen, nobody likes being cooped up, but we understand the reasoning behind it, and hopefully now we're starting to see the government easing the restrictions. But when this all broke out, this terrible virus, we understood that we had to keep our distances, and the best way to try and save lives was to stay incubated at home. But it's unprecedented. It's never happened to probably anybody before, but it was for the right reasons.
Well, I just wanted to touch before we talk about your book, Tackled, and of course, like your story. Of course, at the moment, you're doing your punditry and commentary at MUTV. I just wanted to ask, how did that come about? Like, it almost coincided with the publishing of your book, or was it more just coincidental of how it came about?
No, I think that even probably going back 7 or 8 years now, MUTV, they sort of used to ring me maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks, to ask me would I be interested in coming back and doing some commentary. And the way that it started to pick up was that in 2013, I got a call from the club asking would I go back and start doing lounge hosting, in the ex-players, people like Norman Whiteside, Lee Martin, Russell Beardsmore, Frank Stapleton. We've got about 10, 12 of us that all do it. And I was delighted. And I think with that came more opportunity for me to be in contact with people. And about, I would say probably 2 seasons ago, I started doing a few of the away games, and with the, first team away games, going with Stuart Gardner and maybe another pundit. And then last season, or I should say the season that we're currently in the middle of, I've done every away game apart from the Sheffield United game when I was on my way through Russia to Kazakhstan for our Europa League fixture with David May and 1 or 2 others. So yeah, it's been brilliant the way it's come about. I enjoy every minute of working with so many different people with MUTV, but certainly getting to be there on away day match days is something that obviously used to belong to Paddy Creran. Well, Paddy just does the home matches now. The travelling was getting a little bit much for him, and I was, sort of chomping at the bit, ready to sort of fill his shoes, if you like, and I've really, really enjoyed it.
Well, I just want to start on your book. So I've heard you say that you didn't actually set out to write the book. There was no real plan to write it, and someone came to you and talked about maybe it's a good idea for you to tell your story in a book. What was your initial response to when you were told that your story could be commanding of a book?
Shocked and surprised, to be perfectly honest with you. What happened was the guy that ended up co-writing my book with me, Dan Poole, he'd been a big Man United fan and probably started to become really involved with football when my team, the class of '92, was being spoken about. And because I split my time between Manchester and Essex, where I live. You don't get this weather in Manchester, by the way.
Yeah.
So you'll probably see it's the southeast. Then I travel a lot through Euston Station, and Dan had seen me because he worked just around the corner from there, and he'd seen me and sort of never really put up the courage to ask me. So via way of a letter, he wrote to the club and said, would it be possible to meet up, because I've got something that I've been cherishing for a while, and you're one of the signatures that I'm missing. So I signed the book. We had a cup of tea, cup of coffee, whatever, and we went away. And then he actually texted me, 'cause in between times I'd given him my number, and he texted me and said, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I just said no. And basically, why would anybody be interested? Anyway, the angle that he asked me to think about and have a look at was if I sort of studied the number of people that I'd actually played with during my time at Manchester United, and with the regard that I was held in by certain players and certainly by Sir Alex Ferguson, it would make for very interesting reading if we can get those people to actually speak about you and what sort of a player you were and how it changed you after your injury and what sort of a lad you are. And I just thought, well, I still don't feel as though my story would be of any interest to anybody that wasn't a real sort of staunch Man United fan. And he managed to convince me, and over the space of what I would say about 14 months, we set about it in, I would say, August to September of 2017. Some people were a lot easier to speak to than others. David Beckham, for example, was on his way to the airport to fly to Miami. But everybody that I asked, and I know there were one or two people that I would love to have asked and that politely declined for whatever reasons they had, nothing to do with the fact. I'm hoping that it was me that they were asking to speak about. And obviously the one huge regret, and understandably so, was just at the time that I'd made a meeting to speak with Alex Ferguson. He had his terrible illness, if you like, when he was hospitalised, and I never really got a chance to speak to him face to face. But other than that, we spent about 12, 13, 14 months accruing all these different sort of paragraphs about me from various different players. And that was the way that Dan wanted to try and work it, and it would make it interesting, and the book format would be different from most, having a start, a beginning, and an end. It jumps around all over the place, and I think that for people reading it, I think that they would have not just because they might have been Man United fans, but I think the way Dan wrote it and the way that he brought in the different players at appropriate times, I thought it was brilliantly written by Dan, and I was really, really pleased with it.
And I've heard you say that publishing the book was quite difficult because you went after quite a few publishers and a lot of them declined, because I heard you say it was quite similar to the Adrian Doherty story.
That's right.
So what was that like, that process? Because you must have thought that at points the book might not have been published and might not have come out.
I would say, Sammy, that we were probably a week away from that point. We were a week away from that point. Dan had gone after so many different publishers, and one or two just flatly said no. Mm-hmm. And I would say that the majority did say that they probably found it too close to the Adrian Doherty book, and I could sort of understand that. It was a young kid with loads of promise and loads of potential. That things didn't quite happen. I mean, God bless his soul, Adrian was a fantastic player, but I am still here. What happened to Adrian was terrible. And from what I remember of him, fantastic lad, and just really quirky, coming in with his guitar, and a terrific footballer who, again, had a terrible knee injury. But yeah, it was a week. I would say it was a week where me and Dan had turned around and we'd said to each other, we've pretty much exhausted all avenues here, and we're going to have a cut-off point for when we just say, enough's enough. We've got all the information, or we can get all the information, but there's no point in going to all that trouble if we're not going to find anybody to publish the book. But then Paul and Jane Camelin, they from Pitch Publishing, they at the 11th hour they said, "Yeah, go on, we'll take it on," because they do a lot of sports autobiographies, and they took it on, and they were absolutely fantastic to work with. Paul is actually the press officer down at Brighton Football Club, so I've actually inadvertently bumped into him in the couple of times as well that we played Brighton, and I've been there in my MUTV capacity. Lovely guy, as is his sister, and I'm very, very grateful that they took a chance on me.
And I just wanted to touch on the story where, of course, you came through at Manchester United, the class of '92, and then obviously suffered a horrific knee injury. I just wanted to go back to when you were injured for that year. Was there any of a thought or doubt in your mind that you might not return to football?
Yes. Yeah, I think when I saw the state of my leg after the operation had happened, it just didn't look like a leg that I recognised, and I wondered, with obviously the words from the surgeon and seeing what I could see, I just wondered whether, April the 6th, 1994 might have been the last time I ever kicked a football professionally. But you're at the right club to be able to get back from stuff like this. You have the right people around you, and Sir Alex Ferguson and all his medical staff that he had there at the time, Dave Fever in particular, and of course the surgeon. I mean, Jonathan Noble was my surgeon, and he actually said that it was probably one of the top worst 3 knee injuries that he's ever seen. And we both sort of, whenever we've spoken about this, and especially when we were talking about the book, we both sort of pat each other on the back, if you like, because I say about him that if he hadn't done the repair job that he'd done on my knee, I may never have been able to play professional football again. And he said he was just doing his job, and all the real difficult work and hard work, both physically and mentally, was down to me, because it is how I applied myself and how much motivation I had to be able to get back from such a terrible knee injury. So he says it's me, I say it's him, and eventually we sort of agree to disagree and meet in the middle, that we both couldn't have done it without each other. So yeah, there were plenty of times, and not just at the time, during my rehabilitation, and maybe even a year or two after that, when I never really thought I was ever going to fulfil the potential that I showed as a kid. I knew that my days at Manchester United had finished, but I was wondering how far down the pecking order I was actually going to drop. And that was quite a worrying time as well. But, I managed to, like I said, to sort of surround myself with the right people, both at Man United and outside, and my family, and they all gave me terrific support and gave me the real help that I needed, both physically and emotionally. And it just about made me able to overcome what a bad time of it I'd had.
When you were talking about what you just mentioned, the people at Manchester United that you surrounded yourself with, everyone talks about the culture at Man United. It's almost like a family-orientated feel. It's all about the players' well-being, and they look after the players. Is that the sense? Is that what you sensed from the club when you were out on the injury table?
Oh, definitely. I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson was at the game that when the knee injury happened, and he wasn't sitting actually too far away from my dad. And when I went over, or when I was tackled, he grabbed him straight away and brought him straight down. Such was the extent that they probably knew the knee injury I'd got. And from day one, he was always extremely supportive. He gave me all the help that I could possibly need. There were one or two times when he got me in his office and said that he didn't feel as though I was working hard enough, which is which is fair enough. But that always ended up with a conversation of him saying, "Listen, I'd rather that you were coming in here to to work really, really hard rather than just coming in and going through the motions. He said, if you feel like that, he said, just have a few days off or have a week off. Speak to myself, speak to Dave Beaver. He'll come and speak to me. If you just feel as though you need a little bit of time away and you've pushed yourself to the absolute limit, and you can't give any more, then go away, have a break, and then come back. He said, I'd rather see you working at 100% than coming in and just going through the motions, and that's just not going to get you anywhere. But him and all his staff and the lads who I grew up with there, they were all absolutely fantastic. Just couldn't have done it without them.
And you just talked about Alex Ferguson. You came under the guidance of Eric Harrison at Manchester United. What was he saying to you during the injury process and after it?
Well, Eric we'd left Eric by this time. Don't get me wrong, we saw him day in, day out, and he was always somebody that we were thrilled to chat with. But our tenure with Eric came to an end when we lost in the 1993 FA Youth Cup final to Leeds, and then we stepped up then to go into the reserves with Jim Ryan. So I was sort of more liaising with Jim Ryan and the manager than I was with Eric. But that's not to say that Eric wasn't concerned as well. And I think at any given time I would speak to different members of the coaching staff, both from first team down to junior levels, because you need a little bit of everything. You can't just rely on one person telling you what to do, because you never know what somebody might say when you're least expecting it that might help you to overcome what you're going through. So I wanted to speak to as many people as possible, and such is the class of Manchester United as a club, that it employs people that enable you to do that.
And I just wanted to take you back to the FA Youth Cup, the two finals in a row. When you were a part of that academy and that system under Eric, what was the feeling like around the place? Did you know, and did all the players know that you were onto something special and there was a special connection with the players? Yeah,
I get asked this a lot, because everybody says that it was the first time in 27 or 28 years, I can't remember the exact date, when we won the Youth Cup in '92 against Crystal Palace. But I sort of go back to the start of that season. We came into training the first week in July in 1991, and at the end of that month, after about 3 weeks of pre-season training, hard pre-season training, we went over to Northern Ireland to play in the much famed Milk Cup, mm-hmm. which is a terrific tournament. Now, we'd only ever heard about it. We know that one or two of the lads had played in it before when they were a little bit younger. But we were taking a team over there, and that was the first time I thought, this team has got a chance. Obviously, we hadn't done anything up to that point, but we did win that tournament, and we'd beaten some real tough teams, including Liverpool in the quarter-final along the way. And I actually thought that the teams that we'd beaten were real strong outfits, and yet we managed to get past them and win it. And I think that after probably around the sort of September, October time, once we'd, I think our first game in the FA Youth Cup was a real tough draw. I think we were away at Sunderland, and I remember going in at half time. I think we were winning 2-1. I went in at half time, and then we came back out for the second half, and it was the pitch within 10 minutes was covered in snow, and they had to change the colour of the ball. And that was a particularly tough draw for Man United to get. Sunderland, had a very, very good side. So we got through that, and I think that it started to dawn on everybody in September, October time. Once we'd had a couple of victories in that, and the games that we were playing on a Saturday, we were getting through with relative ease and winning them. I think then that's when the lads thought to themselves, like I did when we won the Northern Ireland Milk Cup, that we've got a real chance. But we still had to beat some big sides, and Spurs, who was everybody's fancied to win the cup. And we still had Ryan Giggs in the team at that, and we're able to call on him. And we called on him for the first leg of the game at Old Trafford. Nicky Barmby was sent off, and by the time the full-time whistle went, we were taking a 3-goal lead back down to White Hart Lane, and we won the return game anyway. So the semi-final wasn't as difficult as we thought, but it was still a little bit easier than the final against Crystal Palace. We were a special group of players at that time, but we also had somebody in charge in Eric Harrison that made sure that we always kept our feet on the ground. We didn't get carried away. We didn't let ourselves believe that we were something that we weren't, because at the end of the day, yes, we'd done well as 16, 17-year-olds to win the Youth Cup, but we hadn't played in the first team. And Eric Harrison always said, "You're a good player when I tell you you are, and until that point, you just keep going." And that was what Eric was like. Him and Sir Alex Ferguson were cut from the same cloth. They were very old school, but they believed in a real work ethic. And those lads, we all had that in abundance. And if you combine that with the managerialship of Sir Alex Ferguson and Eric Harrison, plus the talent that these lads had as well, then you were always going to be in line to win something.
And just talking about Eric Harrison, what kind of manager and coach was he? Was he someone that focused a lot on the man management side of the role?
He did all the coaching. He was tough. His man management style. I know you have to be a little bit more choice in the way that you go about things with the modern day footballer today. But Eric Harrison's way was much like Sir Alex's way. That in a dressing room, if you weren't doing it as you were instructed to do, or you weren't putting in 100%, he would rollick you, and he didn't care who you were. There's a number of times that we had first team players that had dropped down to play in the A team, for example, if they were coming back from injury, and he wouldn't care who they are. On numerous occasions, he'd turn to him and say, "If you want to come and play in my team, then don't come in and ruin it, because this group of players have done me proud so far, and I'm not having you fancy dance coming down into the changing room and spoiling it for me." And that's exactly what he was like. And Sir Alex Ferguson would have had his full backing over that, because he respected Eric a lot, and he knew that he was the man to be able to bring people like our class of '92 on. And he did it before that, and he did it after that. So it wasn't just the fact that it was all surrounded with the class of '92. He brought players through like Norman Whiteside, like Mark Hughes, and subsequent players after that as well. So he deserves a tremendous amount of credit, and somebody who very sadly isn't with us either anymore.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to touch on something post-injury. When the moment that you stepped back onto the pitch after being out for so long, what was that feeling like? Was it relief or was it happiness? What was that initial feeling?
It was a mixture of emotions, because you'd know that you'd worked extremely hard to get to that point. When I said to you where I was, when you asked me the question 10 minutes ago about, did I think I was ever going to play? And then here I am with a red shirt on, and all right, it isn't the first team, but it is a competitive game of football, which is what I've been striving towards. So for that end, I was extremely happy, because the work that I'd done had paid off, and I was able to start a 90-minute football match. The other way I can look at it was disastrous, because it was if I'd never played football before. I was absolutely useless, and I couldn't. I struggled to run. I couldn't get my breath. I struggled to do simple things like pass the ball. It was as if they had just sort of picked me up off the street, because they were short of numbers, and anyone would do. I was that bad, and obviously I got back, and I needed to reflect upon that, because when I said to you before about how far down the pecking order had I fallen, I knew what sort of a player I knew what I was capable of before my injury. So as happy as I was to step back on a football field for the first time in, however many months or nearly a year, I was as sad with the outcome of the actual game, because I just didn't know whether that was me. It was that as good as I was ever going to get again. The answer to that was, thank God, no, no, it wasn't. I did vastly improve, and maybe I was probably being a little bit too hard on myself, because you never know how much this takes out of you when you've had a terrible injury. You can speak to anybody who's had one, who's been out of the game for 7, 8, 9 months, whatever it may be. It's a slow curve to get yourself back to any sort of a level where you feel as though you can compete at the highest level. And I did get myself back there at some point, but I was only ever going to be a bit part player. I never ever got back to the level that the level that I was before that. And I was only ever going to improve with the brilliant players that I could have had the opportunity to play with. And that is probably the one thing that I do have the most regret about, is not how much I would improve myself, but how much playing with these fantastic players that we've seen coming through Manchester United, how much would they have improved me?
And was there a moment when you left Manchester United that you thought, or prior to leaving United, where you thought, this is it, I think I just need to leave and maybe get a new fresh start and somewhere else where I can build my career up again?
Oh yeah, I mean, when I went on loan in the 95-96 season, before Christmas I went to Stockport County, and then at the turn of the year, in January, it might have been the beginning of February, but I stayed a majority of 1996 at Huddersfield Town, where I eventually, signed for 2 years later. But I really enjoyed it. I mean, I did feel for those sort of 4 months under Brian Horton and with some of the players that they had there as well, I really felt as though I was starting to enjoy my football again, to come back into some sort of form where, I could do this. This is the top end of the championship. I can do this. This is quite easy for me, sort of thing. And at the end of that season, I got recognition for the national side. So I played for the England under-21s, which was great with David Beckham in the Toulon tournament. And I went to see Sir Alex just prior to going to that, or just when I came back from that tournament. And again, I'd had a good tournament, and he'd seen some of it. And maybe for me, it probably would have been better if I hadn't played so well and I'd not had such a successful loan spell at Huddersfield, because he wanted to keep me there for another 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I suggested that I would perhaps like to go to Huddersfield at that time. I knew that they were interested in buying me. Brian Horton had said, I'm going to speak to Sir Alex to see if we can sort something out. But he sort of priced me out of the market a little bit, because he wanted me to stay for another couple of years. And I think that, when you're sitting opposite Sir Alex Ferguson, it can be a very intimidating place, as superb a fella that he is. It can still be very intimidating, and your head's telling you one thing and your heart's telling you another. And on that occasion, I let my heart rule my head, and I succumbed and stayed for another 2 years, when really, if I'd been a little bit more headstrong, mm-hmm. I would have insisted to Sir Alex that, this was the break that I needed and this was the right time for me to go. However, 2 years later, in 1998, he did say, I won't stand in your way this time. And we have remained friends ever since. And that is something that I will always cherish.
And I just wanted to speak about going out on loan, because a lot of players speak about playing at the big clubs and going down on loan, the pressure that they may feel because they're expected to be the best player coming from a big club, especially the size of Manchester United. Did you feel any pressure playing down at Stockport and Huddersfield?
Do you know what? I didn't actually.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel any pressure at all. In fact, I felt completely the opposite. I felt as though it was like a pressure valve had been released. That I'm actually excited about a fresh challenge, about doing something different, about playing in front of a crowd where it actually means something. And I don't mean that playing in Man United's reserves doesn't mean anything, but these lads are playing to get promoted. They're playing to perhaps get moves to a bigger club. And at both Stockport and Huddersfield, I was welcomed into both changing rooms without any problems, and just went in and hit the ground running. Things went a little bit awry at Stockport towards the end. I asked whether I could make my own way to a game against Burnley, which they duly granted, and then got stuck in a bad crash on the motorway. And I missed I didn't miss the start of the game. I was there for the start of the game, but because they weren't sure whether I was going to be there or not, they obviously had to hand in the team sheet 45 minutes before kickoff, and I wasn't there, and they weren't sure I was going to be. So I was on the bench, and Sir Alex wasn't happy about that at all, and immediately he recalled me. I stayed at home for Christmas, obviously training, and then in the new year I went off to Huddersfield Town, where I had a great time, great relationship, great rapport with the fans and with the manager Brian Horton, who I've got a lot of admiration for, and some of the lads that I met when I walked through that door, I still keep in touch with now, and that's 23 years ago. So, it wasn't. I didn't feel any pressure. If anything, it was a release for me and a way for me to go and showcase what I can do.
And at Huddersfield, were you also managed by Steve Bruce at one point?
Brian Horton was the manager when I was there on loan in 1996. When I went back and signed for Huddersfield in 98, I worked under 3 different managers. I started off with Peter Jackson and Terry Yorath. Then Steve Bruce came in the second season. And then in the third season, I was managed by Lou Macari and Joe Jordan. Yeah. Lou, of course, who I worked with on MUTV as well. So, yeah, we had 3 different managers in 3 years. And it was a shame because Huddersfield was a fabulous club. And from when I arrived there in my first season, we were like 1 game away from we needed to win 1 game to make the playoffs in our first season. And unfortunately, the game that we needed to win was at Fulham, who ended up being promoted that season. And we had a man sent off. And from then on in, it was and that was heartbreaking, because that would have been something that I was really looking forward to, was to be involved in a playoffs for a team, and sadly that didn't happen with either Stockport or Huddersfield, and we were very, very close.
And at your permanent stint at Huddersfield, what was that, playing under 3 managers? What was that like, just adapting to every sort of manager? Yeah,
good question. Yeah, it is a little bit strange. I mean, when Peter Jackson, who was the manager that signed me, he just said, listen, go out and he said, I'm not going to tell you how to play. You've come from Man United, you know what you're doing. You're just here to help improve our team. Steve Bruce was obviously, he'd had managerial experience in elsewhere, and he was growing into a very, very good and well sought after manager. He knew that he had money at his disposal with the new businessman that had come in and bought the club in 1999, and he knew that he was able to bring in players that he thought would really make us challenge for automatic promotion. It got off to a good start, but then sadly things went a little bit wrong, and there were players there that were on big money, and I'm talking 350,000, 400 grand a year, and we're talking before the turn of millennium here. That was it was big money for the Championship then, £6,000-7,000 a week, and in the end we got relegated, and I think it was the start of that season that we went about 10 games unbeaten. One of Steve Bruce's signings, George Donis from Greece, he signed him when he first came in, and he on a 3 or 4 year deal. And the second season, when we all reported back for pre-season training, George sent a message with his agent to say, "I'm not coming back."
Yeah.
So, you know, these were problems that Steve Bruce encountered. Some of the players that he brought in didn't perform. And like I said, for that first season, the second season that he took charge, we only won 1 game out of 10. And I think that he probably might have been given the sack sooner, but it was only the 1 game that we did win was against Bradford. And that was, you know, a big Yorkshire derby. But it didn't last long, and Steve Bruce was unfortunately given the sack. And with that, the chairman who put all the money into the club took the money out. So it was left with players there that were on big money, and we fell through the trapdoor not once, but the season after I left as well they went through and got relegated again. So there were players still earning 250, 300 grand a year in the bottom tier of English football, and it just wasn't sustainable. It's a shame.
Well, I just wanted to talk about retirement as well, because when you came to the decision to retire, was that built up over a few years or a few months? Like, how did you come to that decision?
I think the one thing that I always wanted to do if I ever got the opportunity was to play in a competitive team with my brother. Mm-hmm. My brother's a couple of years younger than me, and he's played all his footballing life at semi-pro level in the northwest of England. And we both got the opportunity to play for Witton Albion, which is literally a stone's throw from Northwich Victoria's ground. And the guy that was in charge was a great guy. I really liked him, and he liked me as well. And they were a great bunch of lads. And my brother said, "Listen, you know, you've been training with us. I think he wants to sign you. Would you sign for 1 season?" So I think it didn't really take me much persuading, because it was always something that I'd wanted to do. You know, I'd grown up with Gary Neville, and he got the opportunity to do it with Phil. And it must be a really sort of proud feeling for parents to see, you know, 2 of their sons or daughters playing in the same team. So yeah, it was a decision that I decided I would make. I think I was probably about 34, 35. But as soon as that came to an end, I was ready for just saying, "That's me," and I will, you know, I'll restrict myself to just playing like charity matches. I don't want to get involved. And then I moved to Essex, and I got involved playing on a Saturday down here before I became extremely busy with doing the work for MUTV. And I was roped back into playing on a Saturday afternoon. It wasn't semi-professional, but it was just a great way to, you know, to get the ball out again, to mix with a dressing room and a group of lads. So, but I definitely don't do it anymore. I'm a lot older now, and like I said, I just play in ex-players matches that myself and Russell Beardsmore sort out around the country, and we had quite a few lined up for this for these last few weeks and the forthcoming weeks, but obviously the coronavirus has sadly put pay to those.
Well, Ben, thank you for the time. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming to the channel. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not at all. No, you just keep up the good work. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, and take care and all the best. You too. Remember to like, comment, share and subscribe. Remember to check out Ben's links, which will all be in the description below. Also remember to order Tackled if you have not already. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and see you.